Hello, folks. Welcome back to Inside the Marble Palace, Postmedia's legislative podcast of all things political. I am Murray Mandrick, political columnist for the Regina Leader Post. Joining me is always, back from his holidays, Arthur White-Crummey, legislative reporter for Leader Post and Star Phoenix. Hello, Arthur. Good to see you again.
Good to see you, Murray.
And joining us from CBC Radio, their provincial affairs reporter, Adam Hunter. Hi, Adam. Thanks so much.
Hi, Murray. Hi, Arthur. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're going to get into your piece pretty quickly, Adam. Adam did a great piece today outlining the COVID problems. But first, let's talk about those COVID problems, Arthur. As best as you can recall off the top of your head, what are the numbers looking like, or what strikes you is interesting in terms of the numbers we're seeing is we are now well into this fourth wave of the Delta variant, and what's happened over the last couple of weeks?
Well, yeah, things have gotten pretty dicey while we've been away, Murray. Since about early August, the 7-day average has been climbing up pretty precipitously. It's now at its highest level of the pandemic so far in Saskatchewan at about 350 cases a day on average. That's trading places with Alberta as the highest in the country on a per capita basis. That being said, cases might not always be the best guide these days, particularly now that vaccinations are so widespread, not necessarily in Saskatchewan, but in general. What the province has been looking at is hospitalizations, and they're also getting quite bad, up to about 150 province-wide in terms of people who have COVID-19 who are in hospital. That's not quite as bad as it was in the spring when it was around 200 at the height, even higher than that. But certainly something that's been troubling for a lot of health workers who are starting to see bypasses at some of our hospitals. That's people getting rerouted out of places like Saskatoon and Prince Albert because they can't take any more patients. Certainly there's been talk about whether the SHA might even be considering service slowdowns again to bring in more people from other parts of the health system to support the COVID response. That's something that we haven't really seen since the spring. So a lot of things to be concerned about.
I saw the testing lines in Saskatoon yesterday that someone posted on Twitter, Arthur, and I found that stunning in terms of the number of people lined up for tests after the long weekend. And I think after something like that, you can only anticipate a spike in numbers because more people are tested, the more cases that we're going to have. Is that a likelihood from what the doctors are saying right now? And as I think you point out, the health system seems very stressed, as are the doctors and nurses who are very active on social media telling us this and trying to communicate that message.
Well, I think the thing to look at in that regard, I mean, testing is actually down relative to where it was during the higher numbers in the spring. I mean, testing has been a little bit higher over the past week or so, but it's not especially high compared to where it's been in other parts of the pandemic. So I wouldn't necessarily chalk it up to that. This is clearly something that's being fueled by the Delta variant, as is the case virtually everywhere else in the country and in the world right now.
Adam, one of the numbers that just stunned me yesterday is that we actually had more cases of COVID-19 than we did tests. And that is, by the way, both first and second doses. You did a really interesting piece today about the vaccines that are not being used right now because people aren't getting out and using them. And we've talked long about us having hit a plateau in terms of our vaccination rate. Tell us a little about your piece and what you found and why it's disconcerting to you.
I wrote about where we're at in the fourth wave, how we got there, and how Saskatchewan compares to the provinces, both in things we're talking about like vaccination rate, where either the lowest or the second lowest, depending on the day. If you look at the over 12 population and the overall population, we kind of flip-flop with Alberta. We're both near the bottom among provinces. And if you look at the case rate, as you mentioned, Arthur, with that high number at 350, Saskatchewan last night passed Alberta for case rate per 100,000 to lead the nation. And that is something we haven't seen in a while. And so when you look at these two, factors, people are asking, as you mentioned, Murray, doctors. As you also said, we had more cases than vaccinations reported yesterday, the lowest number of vaccinations in a number of months. And the province isn't following the footsteps of Ontario, Quebec, Manitoba, and BC, notably in a number of their measures like indoor mask mandates, proof of vaccination or negative tests for indoor places or for events. And Alberta, more recently, in response to some of their pressures on the hospital system, has introduced indoor masking again province-wide and offered $100 for people to get their first or second shot, which of course got a lot of criticism from people who, over the weekend, including some columnists who said, we shouldn't be rewarding people who have been holding out. In Saskatchewan, we're doing none of that. So that was part of what my piece was focused on, what the province has said, what they're wanting to do, and it looks like it's been a wait and see approach, and it's been a hands-off approach, which is something we're not used to during the pandemic from this government. But it's been a real switch, and I think you guys will both know that when we've heard from the Premier and the Health Minister in the past, this has been about, we got to reduce hospitalizations, we got to protect the vulnerable, we got to protect older populations. Now with the Delta variant, we're seeing younger people, unvaccinated people in the hospital. They're filling up the hospitals and the ICUs, overwhelming in Saskatoon, according to doctors there. And yet the government has chosen so far not to implement any policies that medical health officers have been asking for, whether that's mask mandates, vaccine passport or proof of vaccination, or vaccine mandates. Last week, the government said they were going to look towards getting tier 1 and 2 health workers vaccinated. But I would guess that most of those tier 1 and 2 health workers are already vaccinated at a pretty high rate. So that's not going to bump the numbers up significantly. And to give people a sense of how we're going, a couple of weeks ago, we had Minister Merriman in a scrum disagree with reporters saying that the vaccinations hadn't stagnated. I didn't encourage anyone to go to the government's own website to check on that chart, and you'll see that there's a flat line on both first and second doses, and they're growing by about 1 or 2%, depending on what age category, some by less than 1% a week. So they have really stagnated, and the government, as of right now, as of this recording, hasn't announced any new health measures or anything to kickstart vaccinations.
I'm glad you brought that up, because before we get back to Arthur, I am very much struggling to understand what the government strategy is right now, beyond let's ride this through and hope that somehow the numbers get significantly better because of vaccinations and everything else. What I think the Delta variant is showing us is that it's hammering the hell out of people that don't have vaccines, and they have vaccines sitting in the fridge and people not getting them. I don't understand fully how the government is going to basically deal with this, because I think what Arthur said in terms of those rising case numbers and hospitalizations, obviously not as bad as the spring, but certainly getting up there, and quite horrendous when you consider how many people and how many older people are actually vaccinated and shouldn't be in hospitals or in peril anyway. Are you getting any sense, Adam, what the government's next move might be whenever they do make it? Because I truly am not, and I guess I'm of the belief that they're just going to hopefully ride this out right now, but that doesn't make any sense to me.
I'm not sure what the strategy is. I think we have to take the government at its word when on July 7th, the Premier said we're not going to impose widespread health restrictions, and they've stuck to that. As recently as last week, Dr. Shahab, who said that he recommended everyone wear an indoor mask in a public place, but the government didn't put that into a policy position. But he said it's on personal responsibility, which is what the government's pivoted to. It's pivoted to that when it comes to health measures, pivoted to that when it comes to vaccinations. We've heard the health minister again and again said that, these are personal choice. We've heard Scott Moe say that you're making the wrong choice for not being vaccinated. But at some point, there's going to be a critical mass where there's enough people that aren't vaccinated that are causing problems, whether that's, making more cases in the community or problems for the healthcare system. And the thing we're hearing from healthcare workers, as you mentioned, Murray, is not only burnout, but just disappointment that they're still here and they're facing this fourth wave, and they're not seeing what they think is the support they need or the interventions they need from the government in terms of policy. But they are pointing out to people that, hey, if you have a heart attack or your loved one gets sick or you're in a car crash, there may not be a bed for you in one of the major cities. And in Saskatoon, it seems to be more dire. You know, there's about 6 or 7 times the amount of cases, active cases reported in Saskatoon. There, Johnny mentioned the testing issues. We all know that eHealth had an outage last week because of people trying to get that vaccination record, because almost every province they go to now, they'll need some proof of vaccination. If they want to go to a Rough Rider game, they need proof of vaccination. If they want to go to university or Sask Poly, they need proof of vaccination. And eventually in the city of Regina, to get into city facilities, swim lessons, things like that, the Brand Center, they're going to need proof of vaccination. So there's all these pressures on the healthcare systems. We've heard from the Union of Nurses and others in the health officials that there isn't the same staffing level as there was when there was a state of emergency, when staff could get moved around, when they were out of their regular jobs, and there were full complement of people in testing centers doing contact tracing. We haven't mentioned that yet, that now if any of us get COVID, it's up to us to call our friends and family or anyone we came into contact with. And as you know, more people, they say 80% of the cases on a daily basis or more are unvaccinated people. So if those people are choosing not to get vaccinated, whether that's a personal choice that they just don't believe in the vaccine or they're just being complacent, are those people likely to contact trace to their community to tell them that they're COVID positive? I think that's another question that I know that healthcare workers are raising as a concern. Tracy Zambori from Sun said that this is a storm, I'm paraphrasing, that we are not prepared for. We don't know what's going to hit us if we're not contact tracing properly. So there's all sorts of angles to this right now, and Saskatchewan's in the worst position in the country as far as case rate, and with those low vaccination rates and nothing really spurring them on. I don't know if this is going to turn around anytime soon. We're kind of on that trajectory upwards as we've seen the curve.
Arthur, you traveled a bit this summer, and I know you didn't turn off your reporter's brain. You were in other provinces. I'm curious to get a better understanding whether what is going on in Saskatchewan is similar to what's happening in other jurisdictions, mostly in terms of the public reaction, or is there a stronger public reaction in places that you're seeing or have been to in recently? And is the government potentially reading this wrong in terms of how frustrated and angry it would be? I know that there was a tremendous outpouring of anger on social media last night, just for the simple fact that the Premier had an event at Elk Ridge Golf Course last night and was there, as opposed to basically answering questions in any kind of other forum. And I'm kind of wondering whether there is that tolerance right now for this situation going on much more than it is, or is this sort of something that people are getting rather blasé to, and that's something that maybe is a little bit more realistic in other places.
Yes, so you're right. I was briefly out of province for about 2 weeks. First time back to my hometown of Ottawa since the pandemic began, and the mood was very different there. Also, there are still public health restrictions. So you go into a cafe, you go into a restaurant, and you're wearing a mask until you sit down to eat your food. Most businesses there are, implementing various kinds of capacity restrictions just on their own. My mom's favorite cafe was limiting us to 4 people inside, even though there was no public health order in that regard directing them to do so. So there does seem to be a higher degree of vigilance. You see more people wearing masks outside. There's obviously more acceptance in, other provinces for the idea of proof of vaccine requirements. We know from polls that that's more popular in places like Ontario, Quebec, and BC. And I think that you're right, Murray, that there is a lot of anger in certain parts of social media, certainly from some of the healthcare unions that Adam mentioned about why is the province not doing more. But the public mood might be a little bit different. We just got a poll from Angus Reid, I think it came out today or yesterday, showing that Saskatchewan has the lowest level of support for proof of vaccine requirements of any province. It's about 51%, which is lower than any other province. So we're about 50-50 here. That being said, the level of people that strongly oppose such a policy is, I think, 37% or so. So it's higher than the number of people that strongly support bringing in a proof of vaccination requirement. So yes, it's about 50-50 here, but those who oppose it much more strongly and feel very passionately about it. So call that a matter of political culture, call it a matter of the Wild West mentality. I don't know, but it's something that Scott Moe certainly needs to be aware of when he's thinking about bringing in restrictions.
In regard to Scott Moe being aware of it, the key for political success is to be one step ahead of the trend. And I think Arthur's dead on. I think that there is been a long-standing sentiment in this province to maybe not be quite as vigilant as Arthur said about this issue. But the same thing could have been said on masks early on, and then we became adopters to masks quite rapidly, as the rest of the nation is. Is it possible that Scott Moe might be falling a little bit behind the curve, Adam, in terms of where he is? And then once again, I go back to the notion of how angry people seem to be that he was golfing yesterday as opposed to doing something else related to COVID or saying something else. They obviously chose not to say much today, which I think probably supports Arthur's theory pretty well, that they don't have to. Is there a sense maybe that in the great masses out there that they don't have to until there's some tipping point related to hospitals or something?
Well, the Saskatchewan Party represents, the majority of the province as far as the number of seats they have, their support, the amount of votes they get. They have a much wider range of size of the province as far as support geographically, and they know what their supporters want, and they know what the polls are saying, both the public ones or the internal ones. And I think we've heard them reference that in scrums as much. I remember last year Minister Merriman defending their position on a plan, and he said, well, the polls show that we're doing the right thing and we're managing this well. So I think you have to take them at their word on that. And I think there is some truth to what Arthur's saying, that sometimes on social media and online, that anger or that people questioning what the government's doing doesn't necessarily translate into the general populace. And I know that last week when Premier Moe said it would be grossly unfair to make fully vaccinated people wear masks, there was a lot of pushback to that comment. But he's saying it for a reason. He's definitely heard that from people who have been vaccinated, were told to get vaccinated, and they don't want to go back to wearing masks. They don't want to go back to gathering restrictions or limits. So there is some truth to that. I think on the vaccine passport or proof of vaccination, whatever you want to call it, there's going to come to a point where those people that are strongly opposed to it, they're not going to be able to do anything outside of this province of interest, for fun. They're not going to be able to fly anywhere. They're not going to be able to go to a Calgary Flames game, or to go to a concert in another major city, to go visit friends and go to a restaurant in Winnipeg. Who knows? Go into a Pats game in Regina, or go to an event in Saskatoon at Sask Health Center, depending on how these mandates work. That is very limiting. And if you want to go the other way and say, okay, well, I'll get a negative test, that's not going to be cheap either. So there comes to a point here where people are going to get to a crossroads where if they don't want a vaccine passport system, and the Saskatchewan government doesn't do one, and they kind of let this piecemeal a la carte plan come out where different organizations and groups are doing that, then it's going to be limiting for people that want to travel, for people that want to go to events, that want to see friends and family. They're either going to have to get their vaccines, or they're going to have to pay a lot of money to get multiple negative tests. And that's just the reality that's happening when you look at all these provinces that are now adopting it. And people may say, well, the Maritimes, some of those provinces don't have proof of vaccine. Check out their case rates. Check out their vaccination rates. They're much higher than Saskatchewan. There's very few cases there comparably. And so that's apples to oranges comparison right now.
Arthur, we're in the middle of federal election right now. Is COVID-19 a federal election issue in Saskatchewan? And if not, what you did a little bit of work on this issue after you gotten back. What do you see right now as the issues that seem to be motivating the public? Because I see a lot of the usual suspects being talked about in terms of the issues.
Well, yeah, it's clear that COVID-19 is going to be an issue everywhere in Canada, and that's been the argument that Justin Trudeau has been making for why we need to have an election, right? We're at a time when decisions are being made about the post-pandemic future and about the kind of measures that need to be taken to put an end to the pandemic in terms of vaccines. He's been trying to frame the Conservatives as weak on vaccination because they won't say how many of their candidates are even vaccinated. And we saw that recently, that we can't get information from candidates in Saskatoon about how many of them are vaccinated. Zach, our colleague up at the Star Phoenix, was trying to figure that out, and he can't. But O'Toole's position on vaccines is still makes allowance for mandatory tests for people that don't want to get vaccinated, that still want to go on planes, trains, that still want to travel. That's something that Trudeau has been trying to make him look weak on vaccines as a result. Other issues in the election, well, something that's come up recently that might have some, resonance within the province is gun control. That's the attempt of the Liberals to really find a wedge issue to attack the Conservatives with, trying to drive apart their Western base from the suburban votes they're trying to get in places like Vancouver and Toronto. It seems like the gun control issue is the one that's finally starting to stick. And O'Toole has had to come out being pretty defensive about that, walking back a policy in his platform about loosening some of the recent, Liberal restrictions. So that's something that might have resonance for people in rural areas of the province that obviously thought that the Liberal gun control measures were either unfair or didn't make any sense, or were targeting legal gun owners when the majority of crimes are committed by people who get imported guns from the United States. So it's really something that I think could have resonance here. That being said, it's strange to see that the two provincial party leaders are not really weighing in too much during this campaign. Scott Moe has been almost entirely silent. He responded once when he was attacked by Justin Trudeau regarding his own, MRI policy that the federal Liberals tried to frame as two-tiered healthcare. But apart from that, he has been totally unwilling to weigh in on any platform commitments from any of the federal parties, which is very different from last time when he said he was going to call it like he said it, like he saw it, and he did.
This is fascinating to me, Arthur, and maybe we'll wrap up with Adam on that particular issue. Neither Scott Moe nor actually Ryan Meili are campaigning for their federal counterparts. And I know people are going to say, well, the Conservatives aren't the Sask Party's federal counterparts, but come on, they kind of are. And I'm kind of curious about why particularly Scott Moe isn't. I get why Ryan Meili might not, because I don't think Jagmeet Singh is particularly popular out here, but the Conservative brand certainly is popular in Saskatchewan. Scott Moe's a savvy politician. He's clearly identified Justin Trudeau is his enemy, and as Arthur said, he's had no qualms about doing this in the past. Why do you think our political leadership here provincially, and especially Moe, aren't mixing it up a little bit more right now? Scott Moe is a very savvy politician, Adam, and as per what Arthur was saying, one would think he'd be eager to mix it up. Why is he and Ryan Meili both not really getting involved in this election? I guess I see why Ryan Meili isn't, because Jagmeet Singh isn't popular here, but the Conservative brand certainly is. Why is Scott Moe not doing as Arthur suggested and he did last time in the last campaign in 2019?
Yeah, I think we haven't seen the provincial premiers really get involved anywhere in Canada that I've note that I've seen. They're taking a back seat. Part of that may be COVID. We know that Scott Moe's only had one COVID newser in about 2 months. Similar criticism of Jason Kenney in Alberta, who recently did say he was on vacation and came back and made some announcements last week. Similar story for Premier Ford in Ontario, who the Liberals and the provincial PCs had almost a ceasefire, let's say, about criticizing each other. I think we'll hear from Premier Moe after the election. I think we all remember scrum right after the last federal election, where Premier Moe had a fiery speech outside his office and made all sorts of, took all sorts of shots at the Liberal government. They sent a letter. I think that is something that could play out depending on the outcome of the election. But it's going to be interesting, whatever happens, because right now, and it was pointed out to me by of all people, Maxime Bernier, when I interviewed him when he was in Regina, the PPC leader, that the parties aren't talking about the issues that the West cares about. And he mentioned specifically carbon tax, equalization, and pipelines. And we know that it's tricky for the Conservatives right now, and the Liberals for that matter, to talk about those issues because they're fighting over the same territory in Quebec, in Vancouver, where those issues aren't in play in the same way they are in Alberta and Saskatchewan. And that's why you have people like the Maverick Party running a small slate of candidates and the PPC running a full slate, almost talking about those issues to try and curry some favor and gain some votes with people that care about those issues here in Saskatchewan, Alberta, rural Manitoba, and BC interior. So I think that's something to watch for when we look at the election results, how much those third parties bite into the Conservative vote or the Green vote even when it comes down to election day.
It's going to be fascinating to watch. Unfortunately, I think we have one more podcast before the federal vote, so there'll be a lot more next time on that particular issue. But I guess for now we have to wrap it up. Arthur, Adam, thank you very much for your time and trouble and your insights, and we'll see you guys next time on Inside the Marble Palace.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having us, Brian.